My name is Michael. I'm 42 years old now, and for most of my adult life, people believe they knew exactly who I was. A good husband, a reliable employee, a calm, reasonable man. That's what they saw. This is what they didn't. I've never told this story publicly. Not because it's shocking, not because it's dramatic, but because it's uncomfortable in a quiet way. The kind of discomfort that sits with you in silence for years. This isn't a story about one bad decision. It's about what happens when you live a life that slowly stops feeling like your own. 15 years ago, my life followed a very predictable path. College, first serious job, marriage before 30. I didn't question any of it at the time. It felt like momentum, like life was simply moving forward, and I was smart enough not to stand in the way. I married Laura when I was 28. She was kind, organized, practical, the kind of person who remembers birthdays, keeps receipts, and plans vacations months in advance. Everyone loved her. My parents adored her. My friends trusted her. My coworkers said I was lucky. And I agreed. At least I thought I did. The truth is, I didn't fall in love with Laura the way movies describe love. There was no moment where the world stopped. No overwhelming certainty. What I felt was calm. Safety. She made sense. And at that stage of my life, I thought that was what love was supposed to be. Our marriage was quiet. Not unhappy, just controlled. We didn't fight much. We didn't laugh loudly either. Our conversations revolve around schedules, responsibilities, and plans for someday. Someday we'd travel more. Someday we'd slow down. Someday we'd feel more alive. Someday always stayed safely in the future. I told myself that this was adulthood. That excitement fades. That passion is overrated. That stability is the real reward. And for a long time, that explanation worked. Until it didn't. The first crack appeared in a way so small I almost missed it. I started staying longer at work. Not because I had to, but because going home felt neutral. Not bad, just empty. I'd sit in my car for a few extra minutes before going inside, staring at the steering wheel, feeling strangely disconnected from my own life. Like I was watching someone else play my role. People assume dissatisfaction shows up as anger or sadness. For me, it showed up as numbness. I wasn't miserable. I was absent. Then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, everything shifted. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just enough to change the direction of my life forever. Her name was Rachel. She was a new hire in a different department. Someone I wouldn't normally interact with. Early 30s. Recently divorced. Sharp, observant, and unafraid of silence. We met in the break room. A completely forgettable place to begin an unforgettable mistake. Our first conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't deep. But something about the way she listened, really listened, unsettled me. She didn't rush to fill the quiet. She didn't talk just to be heard. When she asked how long I'd worked there, she waited for the full answer. That shouldn't matter. But it did. Over the next few weeks, we crossed paths more often. Elevator rides, meetings, coffee machines. We talked about neutral things at first, work, traffic, the weather. But slowly, the conversation shifted. She asked questions people usually don't. Do you like what you do? Did you always picture your life this way? Questions I didn't have prepared answers for. Questions my life had never required me to answer out loud. I told myself it was harmless. That curiosity wasn't betrayal. That conversation wasn't intimacy. I was still faithful, still responsible, still in control. At least, that's what I believed. Looking back now, I see it clearly. The moment you start hiding conversations, not because they're wrong, but because they matter, something has already changed. At home, nothing looked different. Laura still planned dinners. We still shared bed. Our life remained intact on the surface. But inside me, a quiet restlessness had taken root. And I didn't know yet how much it would cost to ignore it. This was the beginning, not of an affair, not of a scandal, but of a slow unraveling, one honest conversation at a time. There's a moment when something shifts, not loudly, not suddenly, but permanently. You don't notice it when it happens. You only recognize it later, when going back feels impossible. After that first real conversation with Rachel, I told myself nothing had changed. I went home the same way, ate dinner with Laura, answered her questions about my day. Everything looked identical. But something inside me had started paying attention in a way it hadn't before. Rachel, and I didn't plan to talk more. It just happened. She started joining the same meetings. Our lunch breaks overlapped. We ended up walking out of the building at the same time more than once. Coincidences are dangerous when you want them to be. At first, our conversation stayed careful. We talked about work frustrations, about how companies expect loyalty without offering security, about how strange it feels to realize you're not young anymore. Normal topics. Safe topics. Except they weren't. Because they weren't shared with everyone. They were shared with each other. Rachel had a way of asking questions that didn't demand answers, but invited them. She didn't push, she waited. And when I spoke, she didn't interrupt or redirect. She absorbed. That alone felt intimate. One afternoon, we stayed late after a meeting. The office had mostly emptied out, the lights dimmed automatically, the hum of air conditioning filling the silence. She asked me if I was happy. Not casually, not as a conversation filler. She looked at me and asked it like it mattered. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. I said something vague. I'm fine. Life's good. She didn't challenge it. She just nodded. And somehow, that felt worse. That night, lying next to Laura, I replayed the question over and over. Are you happy? I realized how long it had been since anyone asked me that without expecting a polite answer. The next few weeks passed quietly. Too quietly. I found myself waiting for moments I hadn't planned. Listening for her footsteps in the hallway. Noticing when she wasn't at her desk. I hated that part of myself. The awareness. The anticipation. I told myself this wasn't attraction. That it was intellectual, emotional, temporary. I was wrong about all three. One evening, Rachel and I ended up walking to the parking lot together again. It was cold, the kind of cold that makes conversations slower. She mentioned her divorce, briefly, without bitterness. How it wasn't one big betrayal, but years of small absences. How loneliness can exist even when you're not alone. She didn't ask for sympathy. She just stated it like a fact. I didn't say anything, but something in me recognized itself in her words. And that scared me. After that, the line moved. Just slightly. We started texting. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing obvious. A comment about a meeting, that a joke about office politics, that a question about a book she mentioned. But the timing mattered. Late evenings. Early mornings. Moments that didn't belong to work. I deleted the messages sometimes. Not because they were wrong, but because I didn't want to explain why they mattered. At home, Laura noticed I was distracted. She asked if I was tired, if work was stressful. I said yes. Those answers were easier than the truth. The truth was this. I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. And instead of questioning why, I let myself enjoy it. One night, Rachel sent a message I read 3 times before responding. Do you ever feel like your life looks right, but feels off? I stare at my phone. That was the moment. The moment I knew I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't pretend not to see. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I replied. Yes. Just one word. But it carried more honesty than I'd allowed myself in a long time. After that, there was no pretending this was casual. No illusion of neutrality. We hadn't crossed a physical line. But emotionally, I was already standing somewhere else. And I knew it. The worst part wasn't the guilt. It was the relief. The feeling of being understood without having to perform. That kind of relief is addictive. And addiction always asks for more. I didn't know how this would end. I only knew that whatever came next would require a choice. And, for the first time in years, doing nothing no longer felt like an option. There's a lie we tell ourselves before every mistake. I'm still in control. It sounds reasonable, responsible, even. And it's almost always the last honest thought you have before things change. After that message, that single word, yes, something settled between Rachel and me. Not excitement, not urgency, clarity. We both knew what we were doing now. And instead of stopping, I focused on managing it. That was my mistake. I set rules in my head. No touching no secrets at work. No talking badly about my marriage. as long as those rules stayed intact. I could convince myself this wasn't crossing a line, that I was being careful, that I was different. Rachel never pressured me. That made it worse. She didn't ask for more time. She didn't demand attention. She simply existed, present, attentive, honest. And I kept choosing to show up. We started taking walks during lunch. Not every day, just often enough to become familiar. We talked about childhoods, about mistakes we'd made before we understood their weight. She told me about the moment she realized her marriage was over. Not during a fight, but during a quiet dinner when she felt invisible. I knew that feeling. I'd lived inside it for years. I never spoke about Laura directly. That omission felt respectful at the time. Now I know it was convenient. At home, my life continued like a well-rehearsed play. Same routines, same conversations. But I was somewhere else emotionally, smiling at messages I hid, replaying conversations while sitting across from my wife. I hated myself for it. Not enough to stop. The first time Rachel touched me, it was accidental. At least, that's what I told myself. We were standing too close in a hallway, laughing quietly about something unimportant. Her hand brushed my arm. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. That was the moment the rules broke. Not dramatically, just quietly. After that, everything felt heavier, charged. I became hyper-aware of proximity, of pauses, of silences that lingered too long. I noticed the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I noticed how easily my body responded, and I noticed how quickly I stopped questioning it. One evening, she asked if I wanted to get coffee after work. Not lunch, not during office hours. After. I hesitated, just long enough to make it feel like a decision. We chose a small place a few blocks away. Dim lights, soft music. The kind of place people go when they want to talk without being overheard or recognized. We talked for hours. About nothing, about everything. About who we were before responsibility reshaped us. About the versions of ourselves we never fully became. Time moved differently there. When I checked my phone, I had 3 missed calls from Laura. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Not yet. When we left, it was dark. The city quieter. Rachel stopped on the sidewalk and looked at me. Not expectantly. Honestly. She said, "I don't want to be something you regret." That sentence should have ended everything. Instead, it became my justification. I told myself I was being considerate, that I was aware. That awareness, somehow, made this acceptable. I leaned in. Not fast. Not desperate. Slow enough to pretend it was thoughtful. Our kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't impulsive. That's what frightened me the most. Afterward, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not guilt. Relief. Like a pressure I hadn't admitted to was finally released. That relief lasted exactly until I got into my car. Then reality rushed back in. At home, Laura was waiting. Concerned. Confused. She asked where I'd been. I said work ran late. The lie came easily. Too easily. That night, lying next to her, I realized something unsettling. I had crossed the line I swore I wouldn't. And instead of collapsing under the weight of it, I was already thinking about when I'd see Rachel again. That's when I understood the truth. Control isn't lost in one moment. It's surrendered, one rationalization at a time. The hardest part wasn't the lie. It was the maintenance. After that night, everything in my life doubled. 2 versions of every day, 2 sets of emotions, 2 realities that could never touch, but somehow did. I woke up beside my wife and planned my future. Then I checked my phone and felt my chest tighten. Rachel. Just her name was enough to shift my entire state of mind. We didn't talk constantly. That was another rule I invented to feel disciplined. But when we did, the conversations felt necessary. Like oxygen. She understood the pressure I was under without needing details. She never asked me to leave Laura. Never demanded clarity. Which somehow made my guilt heavier. At work, we were careful. Too careful. We avoided eye contact in meetings. Sat far apart. Spoke through others instead of directly. Anyone watching closely would have noticed. And I became convinced that everyone was watching. Paranoia settled in quietly. I started reading expressions, interpreting tones, replaying conversations after they ended. Every question from Laura felt like an accusation. Every casual comment felt like a test. Laura changed too. She became more attentive, asked more questions, tried harder. That was the cruelest part. She started planning things again. Weekend trips, dinners out, conversations about the future. I participated, smiled, agreed, and felt like a fraud every second of it. I told myself I was protecting her. That ignorance was kindness. That the truth would only cause unnecessary pain. Those thoughts helped me sleep. Barely. Rachel, on the other hand, became more real to me every day. Not idealized. Human. Complicated. She had bad moods. She overthought things. She got tired of waiting without saying it out loud. I saw all of it. And instead of pulling back, I leaned in. We started meeting outside of work. Carefully chosen places. Always under the excuse of coincidence. Each meeting required a new lie. Each lie made the next one easier. I don't remember when guilt turned into resentment. But it did. Not toward Rachel. Toward my life. Toward the expectations I'd never questioned. Toward the role I'd accepted without ever choosing. One night, Laura confronted me. Not angrily. Quietly. She asked if there was someone else. I felt my entire body lock up. This was the moment I'd feared. Prepared for. Rehearsed in my head 100 times. And yet, nothing prepared me for how small her voice sounded. I denied it. Immediately. Completely. Convincingly. I said she was imagining things. That work stress was affecting her. That I loved her. Somewhere in that sentence, I realized how far I'd gone. She apologized. For doubting me. For overthinking. I watched the trust drain from her eyes and still said nothing. That's the moment that haunts me most. After that, the pressure became unbearable. Rachel sensed it. She asked what was wrong. I didn't tell her about the confrontation. I didn't want to complicate things. Or maybe I didn't want to hear what she might say. I started making mistakes. Forgetting details. Contradicting my own stories. Losing track of which version of myself I was supposed to be. Living two lives requires precision. And I was exhausted. Then came the message I wasn't expecting. Rachel told me she was considering leaving the company. Not because of me, because staying felt unsustainable. The thought of losing her terrified me. Not losing the affair, losing the connection, the version of myself I became around her. I realized then that I wasn't balancing two lives. I was slowly destroying both. That night, I sat alone in my car again, just like years before. Same driveway. Same steering wheel. Different man. I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to admit. No matter what I chose next, someone was going to get hurt. And this time, I couldn't pretend it wouldn't be my fault. Confessions don't always happen the way we imagine. There was no dramatic breakdown, that shouting, moment where everything suddenly made sense. Just a quiet evening. And a truth that finally refused to stay hidden. Laura was sitting at the kitchen table. The house felt unusually still. I remember noticing small, irrelevant details. The way the light hit the wall, the sound of the clock ticking, the space between us. I knew in that moment that if I didn't speak now, I never would. I told her there was someone else. I didn't justify it, that I didn't explain it away. I just said the words. She didn't cry right away. She asked questions instead. Practical questions. How long? Who was she? Did I love her? Each answer felt like removing a layer of protection I'd built over years. When the tears came, they were quiet. Contained. The kind that don't ask for comfort. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. Some distances can't be crossed back. She asked me why. That was the hardest question. Because there was no single reason. Just years of avoidance, silence, fear of disruption. I told her the truth. I didn't know how to be honest before it was too late. We didn't decide anything that night. There was no resolution. Just exhaustion. Rachel left the company 2 weeks later. We met once after that. Just once. No touching. No promises. She said she couldn't be part of something that began with pain. I respected that. Too late. Laura and I separated quietly. No public explanations, dramatic announcements. People noticed eventually. They always do. Life after confession is strange. You expect relief. What you get instead is clarity. And clarity is heavy. I live alone now. Smaller space, fewer distractions. I've learned to sit with silence instead of running from it. Some nights, I replay every decision. Other nights, I simply accept them. This isn't a story about redemption or villainy. It's about what happens when you delay honesty long enough for it to become destructive. If there's anything I've learned, it's this. Ignoring your truth doesn't make it disappear. It just waits. And when it finally speaks, it takes more than it ever would have at the beginning. I'm 42 years old now. I don't pretend I made the right choices. I only know I'm finally living with them honestly. This was my confession.